Every war has a beginning, and this one started with a party, a woman, and a bullet that never should have been fired. Los Angeles in the 1980s was already a pressure cooker. South Central was burning, the crack era was in full swing, and the streets were stacked with young men looking for belonging in a city that didn't care if they lived or died. On one side was 18th Street, Barrio 18, a gang that dates back to the 1960s Pico Union district. They were the first to break the Mexican-only rule that older sets like Clan Tone 14 enforced. They let anyone in, black, white, Central American, as long as you put in work and rep the numbers. By the mid-80s, 18th Street was everywhere, South Central, Inglewood, and deep into the West Side. A new breed of Latino gang was rising, bigger, hungrier, and far more organized than the sets that came before. Then came the wave of refugees from El Salvador, kids who had seen civil war before they hit high school, bodies in the streets, guns in their hands, and a look in their eyes that said they'd never be afraid again. They landed in Westlake and Pico Union, the same zones 18th Street called home. Those Salvadoran kids banded together under a new name, La Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13. At first, they were the underdogs, mocked for their accent, their music, and their look. They didn't start as a gang. They started as metalhead stoners trying to survive, but when the bullying and extortion from local Chicano gangs wouldn't stop, they adapted. And when they adapted, they became something else, battle-tested soldiers in a new war for respect. At first, MS-13 and 18th Street weren't enemies. They coexisted, sometimes even hung out at the same parties and corners around Pico Union. They shared the same streets and the same struggles, but that peace wouldn't last. According to the old heads, it started over something stupid. A girl at a party in the mid-80s. An 18th Street member and an MS homie known as Shaggy got into an argument. Pride and liquor mixed like gas and fire. It turned into a fight, and when Shaggy dropped the 18th Streeter, dudes ran to their cars. Moments later, an Uzi was out the window, and Shaggy hit the floor. That bullet didn't just kill a man, it ignited a war. From that night on, there was no going back. 18th Street and MS-13 split for good, and what followed was one of the longest-running, bloodiest rivalries in Los Angeles history, a war that would stretch from Pico Union to Central America and back again. By the early 1980s, Los Angeles was changing fast. Immigration, crack cocaine, and over-policing were reshaping entire neighborhoods. The same streets that raised 18th Street, Pico Union, Westlake, and MacArthur Park became the new battleground for survival. 18th Street had already turned into something bigger than anyone expected. What started on the 18th and Union back in the 60s had become a machine. Dozens of cliques across Los Angeles and beyond. They were known for being independent, ruthless, and loyal only to their own structure. The Mexican Mafia taxed them, but 18th Street was so massive it operated almost like its own brand. You could find them in South Central, the West Side, and even Orange County, every set flying the same 18, but with their own code. Meanwhile, MS-13 was finding its footing. The war-torn kids from El Salvador had grown up and started claiming territory. Westlake, Rampart, and the heart of Pico Union. They didn't come up like other Sureños. They weren't just neighborhood soldiers, they were survivors of an actual civil war. Many had seen death before they saw Los Angeles, and that trauma showed in how they operated. Both sides wanted revenge. Old members who were around in the 80s still talk about the ripple effect from that single night. Shooting started hitting both sides across Pico Union, Rampart, and downtown. Then came the tagging wars. MS crossed out 18's placazos, 18 hit back harder. What began as a single street beef turned into something generational. By the 90s, MS-13 had officially joined the Sureño network under the Mexican Mafia, taking on the 13 to show allegiance. But inside, the tension with 18th Street never died. In fact, it got worse. Both were now under the same umbrella, but they refused to share the same space. The Los Angeles Times would later describe it as a civil war among Sureños. Each side had their own prisons, their own alliances, and their own soldiers hitting the streets. It wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about identity. For the next 3 decades, that line between MS-13 and 18th Street would be written in blood. From Pico Union to El Salvador, from the back streets of MacArthur Park to the alleys of San Salvador, the war went global. Once the line was drawn, Los Angeles changed. From Pico Union to Rampart, everyone knew when they stepped off a bus or left a store. They were standing on somebody's block. For MS-13 and 18th Street, that meant one thing: hit first or get caught slipping. By 2013, MS-13 controlled a network of hidden apartments known as casitas, small houses used for drugs, gambling, and women working as hostesses. These were mostly in the Pico Union district, right in the shadow of where their beef with 18th Street had started decades earlier. Inside those walls, one story turned into a cautionary tale that echoed across the city. Gabriela, a teenage girl connected to both gangs, started dating Diego Ryder, an MS-13 member. Through him, she ended up working around the 21st Street casita, selling drinks, helping with small drug deals, and hanging around the crew. But she had friends and relatives from 18th Street, and she worried they'd find out. One night, after an argument about her refusing to work in the house, things went dark. Witnesses later said she was lured outside by Edward and Jose, both from MS-13. As they walked down San Marino Street, she hesitated. Then Edward pulled a small chrome handgun and said,
"Fake Teen Mata rules here."
He fired once into her chest. She tried to run. Jose laughed, waved the gun side to side, and fired again. 13 shots. Somehow, Gabriela survived long enough to tell LAPD that Nino from Normandy had done it. She lived, but her story exposed what MS-13 would do to anyone tied to 18th Street. Edward, Jose, and Ruben were all convicted of attempted murder and each sentenced to 25 years to life. By the early 2000s, MS-13 wasn't just fighting on the streets. They were taxing everyone: shop owners, street vendors, even their own inactive members. A young man named Angel, who joined MS at 13, tried to walk away. But when he came home in 2012, members Oscar, Jonathan, and Ronald found him. They told him he either had to pay $40 every week or get checked. When he couldn't keep up, they pistol whipped him inside his apartment, saying the clica needed its money. Angel started cooperating with LAPD's gang task force, wearing a wire during collections. The recordings helped prosecutors convict Oscar Garcia, Jonathan Portillo, Omar Lopez, and Ronald Castro for conspiracy to commit extortion. Each received sentences between 42 and 49 years to life. That same year, a retaliatory shooting in South LA left 2 MS members, Daniel and Miguel, dead after rivals caught them walking near 6th Avenue. Police suspected 18th Street. From that point on, every extortion bust or shooting tied back to the same tension, each side trying to prove dominance over Pico Union. September 21st, 2014, Western Avenue and Wilshire Boulevard. An 18th Street member known as Brian was waiting for a bus when a dark pickup rolled up. Witnesses saw him flash gang signs, then flip off the truck. It circled the block. 2 men got out. "Everything good?" Brian asked. One of them chambered a round and opened fire. Brian fell onto a woman selling tamales nearby. Both hit the pavement as the shooters ran back toward the pickup. Brian suffered wounds to the head and back and died at the scene. Police later arrested Christian Hernandez from MS-13, who was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life. January 11th, 2010, a quiet day in Koreatown turned deadly. Jose Lopez from MS-13 had been arguing with a man outside a local bakery. That man, William Vasquez, had an old 18th Street tattoo on his pinky, a mark from his youth, even though he'd been out of the life for decades. The next day, Jose came back with 2 other MS members, Brian and Listo. When William turned to face him, Jose raised a revolver. William grabbed the gun, struggling to push it away. The first shot hit his arm, the second hit his neck. He died later from complications. Jose was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. It was one of the first high-profile cases linking MS to direct revenge attacks on inactive 18th Street members, proof that this feud had no expiration date. August 26, 2012, 2 in the morning. The 2000 block of San Marino Street was quiet until gunfire echoed through the night. Witnesses said 2 men walked up, one in gloves, holding a .40 caliber pistol. He shouted, "Where you from?" then opened fire. When the smoke cleared, Juan Hernandez, an MS member, was gone. Luis and KP were wounded. The shooter ran toward a waiting car, a dark sedan with tinted windows. Police arrested Joe Rodriguez from 18th Street Normandy, who was later convicted of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Sentence, 130 years to life. The case marked one of the most violent exchanges in the feud's modern era, and proved that even 3 decades after Shaggy's death, the bullets were still flying in the same zip code. By the late 90s, Los Angeles wasn't just exporting movies and culture anymore. It was exporting gangs. Every flight full of deportees heading south carried the same war that had started in Pico Union and Rampart. Thousands of MS-13 and 18th Street members were rounded up during the Clinton-era immigration crackdowns. Many weren't even citizens, so ICE sent them back to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, straight into countries already unstable from civil war. When those planes landed in San Salvador, Tegucigalpa, and Guatemala City, the gangs didn't disappear, they reorganized. Inside overcrowded Central American prisons, the same street politics that ruled LA spread like wildfire. MS-13 and 18th Street built networks that rivaled local armies. Back in Los Angeles, the LAPD started calling it the boomerang effect. Every crackdown in LA created a stronger, more organized version of both gangs abroad, and those new factions eventually sent influence and orders back to California. In El Salvador, small towns like Soyapango and Mexicanos became known for their own internal 18 versus MS wars, the same feud, new soil. By the mid-2000s, both groups were being investigated by the FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security as transnational criminal organizations. They ran everything from local extortion to international drug shipments and migrant route taxation. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, younger members who had never even been to Central America were fighting under those same colors, following the same decades-old orders. 18th Street controlled pockets of South Central, Mid-City, and Inglewood. MS-13 held down Westlake, Koreatown, and parts of Hollywood. By 2010, the war had blurred the borders, literally. The FBI documented cases where money earned from street extortion in LA was being wired back to imprisoned shot callers in El Salvador, who then sent orders for hits in California. This was no longer a local rivalry, it was an ecosystem. From Central America to the US, thousands of lives and millions of dollars were tied to a feud that began with a single party fight decades earlier. Even now, with federal cases hammering both sides, the cycle hasn't fully stopped. Each new generation inherits the same war, even if they don't remember how it started. By the late 2000s, the federal government finally caught up to the chaos it helped export. The wars between MS-13 and 18th Street had crossed city lines, national borders, and even prison walls, so law enforcement went global too. Starting in 2008, joint task forces from the FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security launched coordinated sweeps across Los Angeles, Maryland, Virginia, and El Salvador. Their goal: take down the leadership networks feeding both gangs from inside and outside the US. The first major blow came in Operation Community Shield, a nationwide offensive targeting transnational gangs. Within months, hundreds of alleged MS-13 and 18th Street members were arrested, many under RICO indictments. Prosecutors used phone intercepts, cash transfer logs, and informants to prove that even local shootings and extortion schemes were tied to an international money pipeline. In Los Angeles, the Rampart and Olympic divisions became central battlegrounds for these investigations. Police recovered coded ledgers documenting taxes collected from street vendors, money wired to El Salvador to pay imprisoned shot callers. Some of those same prisons, packed with deportees from LA, had become command centers. Orders for robberies, hits, and collections in California were being issued from cells thousands of miles away. Federal investigators called it organized chaos. Each takedown, whether of MS-13's Hollywood program or 18th Street's West Side Locos clique, revealed the same pattern: local crime tied to a multinational structure. By 2012, U.S. attorneys filed the largest gang indictment in Central American history, charging MS-13 leaders with running a criminal enterprise spanning 3 countries. Back in California, similar RICO cases hit the 18th Street's hierarchy. Wiretaps captured members in L.A. talking directly to jailed figures in El Salvador about drug shipments and internal discipline. Still, every time one operation crippled a clique, another emerged. New generations were ready to fill the gap, younger, smarter, and more tech-savvy. By 2020, both MS-13 and 18th Street had shifted much of their coordination to encrypted apps, online gaming chats, and international courier systems. For law enforcement, the game had evolved from tracking graffiti to tracing Bitcoin wallets and Zelle transfers. But the root problem, poverty, migration, and broken neighborhoods, hadn't changed since the 1980s. By the year 2023, Los Angeles had changed, but the ghosts of the 80s never really left. The street corners once tagged by MS-13 and 18th Street are quieter now, but the fear still lingers in the neighborhoods that raised both crews. Ask anyone from Pico Union, Westlake, or MacArthur Park, and they'll tell you the war never officially ended. It just went underground. Generations later, kids who weren't even alive during the first shootouts still grow up under the same invisible borderlines. MS-13 still holds pockets of power across the Westlake district, while 18th Street remains a dominant force stretching south through South Central and east toward Huntington Park. The graffiti has faded, but the stories have not. Law enforcement calls it intermittent violence. Locals call it life. The truth is, MS-13 and 18th Street share more history than they admit. Both born from poverty, both abandoned by the same system, both exported and re-imported through deportation policies that turned neighborhood beefs into international conflicts. And now, as social media replaces street corners, new recruits watch the old wars on YouTube and think they're documentaries, not warnings. For Los Angeles, the legacy of this rivalry isn't just written in headlines or court files. It's written in murals, silence, and survival. Because long after the sirens fade, what's left behind are neighborhoods that learn to live between fear and resilience. That's the full breakdown. I would ask you to please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. More stories coming soon. So, until then, watch your step and respect the streets.